And this will be our final tutorial for methods, where we have reviewed everything that has to do with the basic use of methods and the process of abstraction. Pretty much methods that do not return anything, which are void methods. We have methods that return a certain variable, like Boolean, int, string, double. And we have methods that return something with parameters. Now, let's try to finish our fitness app program, just putting everything into methods. We'll review pretty much what we did last time with this program, and then we're going to quickly go and create a couple of methods so we can finish this chapter. Well, just as a reminder, we use a while accept method just because we want to ask the user if it wants to continue inputting information for the fitness app. This is how we do it. So we're going to take away this because we used it just to verify that the accept method was returning true or false, and that way we could continue inside the while loop. Okay, so we have the ask info, which pretty much asks for a name, and it has a parameter, and this parameter is just a personalized phrase. And it prints out the name and then automatically goes into the accept method. So while accept, so it jumps into this method, and it's going to start asking, do you wish to start your training? Yes or no. If it says yes, it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. And depending on that answer, the while loop will stay there, just iterating. Now, we should ask for the information if this is true or not. So basically, we can go, and from this method, when we have the option yes, we can always say return true. And then here, when it continues, we can send this program to a new method. And we're going to create a new method called calculate. So I'm going to write down, I'm going to call the calculate method. And I'm probably going to change the signature while I create the signature. So remember that we can just minimize the methods that we have created, and we can just go ahead and create another method. Okay, we're going to call this one public static. And in this case, what we need to do, because we're going to ask for the amount of steps, and we're going to make some verifications if the steps are true or not. And after we ask for the steps and we verify that they are between 0 and less than 100,000, we are going to ask for the amount of minutes of exercise. So those are the two things that we're going to verify, and they're always going to be the reason why we want to do this. Okay, so we're going to create a new method called public static, and we're going to return in this case, after we have all the calculations, it's going to say your score is whatever, and the score depends on the number of steps and depends on the number of minutes exercised. So this score is pretty much an integer number, so we want to return an integer. So public static int score, or calculate. Okay, and for the calculate, we can ask for all the information inside the calculate, or we can just send information from the parameter. In this case, we're going to ask for all the information inside the method, so we're not going to create, or we don't need to pass on any parameters. So in this case, we're going to create the calculate method, and I'm just going to copy and paste a couple of things here. For example, enter the amount of minutes to exercise. We want to do this. So system.out.println, because remember that in this void main, we need to create our prompt, and then after we create our prompt, we're going to read from the scanner. So we're going to have system.out.println enter the amount of minutes of exercise, then we're going to read from the scanner, and we're going to say minutes will be equal to reader, that's our scanner, read int, next int, and this is going to be the input of the user and the amount of minutes. Now, we need to verify that information, okay? So in order to verify that information, we need to say, we're probably going to create a while loop. So it continues asking until the answer or the input is correct. Okay? So we want to do this, and we're going to say, okay, we're going to create a while true, just because we want it to keep there until the person answers correctly. So we're going to make a while true, and we're going to say if minutes is greater than 0 and minutes it's less than 100,000. Then while this is true, while this is not true, so if this is false, we'll just put the exclamation mark. So we say that this is false, okay? Just saying that as long as this is false, right? Then we're going to say system.out .print line, and we're going to say enter the correct amount of minutes, okay? And obviously we have to ask for the user again. So in this case, it's minutes equal to reader.next. So we're going to ask again for the information until it gets it right. As soon as it gets it right, then if this is true, if this is true, then else, otherwise, then we're just going to break out of the loop and we're going to continue with the program. So in case the person does it correctly, we are going to break out of this while loop. This break will finish the while loop and it will come right over here. So if this meets the expectation, so we are going to continue and ask for our next piece of information. In this case, we're going to ask for the amount of minutes of exercise. Okay, so here we're going to ask for here's a quick change that we need to make. Actually, the steps of the day, this is the first thing we needed to do. So here we needed to enter the amount of steps. This is my fault. The amount of steps, and those steps were between 0 and 100,000, right? And if this is true, enter the correct amount of steps. I'm sorry, we made a small mistake. Just change the steps. If we have the amount of steps correct, then we can head on and ask for the amount of minutes. Here we're going to enter the amount of minutes, and we're going to store it in minutes. And here's another quick change. Instead of minutes, I'm going to put steps. Okay? This is something that you guys are going to probably go back and change it a little. Is the steps, and make sure that we change those minutes for steps. Change those minutes for steps. This is completely normal. So we're going to do the steps. And now we are going to head on and ask for the amount of minutes. Here I created a variable called minutes. And instead of read int, remember that this is just, we're going to create the prompt first. We have to send the line. Okay. And then we can create the amount of minutes saying reader.next int, which is amount of steps. Okay. So take a moment just to verify that you have this correctly. Now we're asking for the amount of minutes and then reading the amount of minutes for the exercise. So this calculate is pretty much like 70% of the program, because it's all the calculation, asking for the steps, then asking for the amount of minutes, etc. Now we need to convert the minutes to hours. And this is just pretty much copy paste because there is no input from any of these. We are just going to create the score, and I'm going to copy until this point just because we need to return something, okay, from the method. Okay, let's pretty much organize this. We have hours, which is the calculations of minutes to hours. Then we have a rounding operation, which is hours plus 0.5. That way we can round it up. And then we have the calculate and display the activity score. And now here's a little difference between the other code, because score is something that we want to return, not display. So instead of saying display activity score, we're going to return the activity score. So in this case, when we're done with this, we're going to return the score. And this is an integer number, which has to be returned from this method. Okay, so we have accept, then calculate. And the calculate method, just like this, as you see it, it's not going to show us anything because it returns an integer number. So we either print it or store it in a variable, whatever you want, but we need to do something with it because calculate returns an integer number. So right now, what we're going to do is that when we call calculate, it's going to do all this, blah, 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 and then return score, and then I'm going to print the score. But we can also store it in a variable and then print it or use it later on if we need to, okay? So let's see if this actually works. Okay, before we actually click on run, let's double check that we changed what we needed. So we had the steps, and the steps reads an int, and then we have steps in the conditional statement. Then we're saying enter the correct amount of steps, and then we got to read, oh, here's a small mistake. We just got to read steps again to see, because otherwise minutes wasn't created at this point in the algorithm. Then break, then we enter the amount of exercise, minutes of exercise, then minutes, then hours, then we print the hours, we print rounded hours is this, and then we have the activity score, and we return the actual score. So now I think that we are ready to click on run. Okay, so we clicked on run, and it says, please enter your full name. Write down Peter Parker. And do you wish to start training? Say yes. Okay. And then it says, enter the amount of steps. Now, if we enter, let's see if this conditional statement is working. So let's put a number greater than 100,000. Let's say 200,000. Let's see what happens. It says, enter the correct amount of steps, and it waits again. So let's say we do 2,500. This should be inside the boundaries of what we wanted. Now it says enter the amount of minutes. So it looks like the program actually turned and finished the while loop, and now it's over here. So it looks good so far. So enter the amount of minutes of exercise. We're going to say we worked out 130 minutes that day. And it looks like, okay, we're getting a score. It says rounded hours 2, and then we got a score of 6. Okay, after all the calculations. So this is pretty interesting because now it says, do you wish to start training? Yes or no. So our while accept method is actually working. It's still here. Like it's going to calculate again. So this is very important that our program is now working very nicely. Now, different from the other one, if you look at this, this is completely organized. We only have a couple of steps. We have here, we have our methods, and we can now see how this is a lot smaller than the one that we did. Let's see if now we're missing something else. I don't know if it says, oh, here. It says, use if statements to provide feedback. Score less than 5. You need more movement today. Score between 5 and 10. Good job. And then excellent if you are very active. So this is a conditional statement that we should do depending on the score. Now, we are going to create a new method and our last method, hopefully, to complete this. And this is, we're going to send the parameter. We're going to send the score to this method. And it's going to say, excellent, good job, or you need more improvement depending with that score. So we're going to use the other types of method. Okay, so let's create a new method. Let me see if I can kind of like, so they're going to allow me to minimize. Here I'm minimizing this. And I have public static void main, public static void ask info, public static boolean. And here I am going to return a string. This time our method will return a string, but it will need a score as a parameter in order to work. Okay, so we're going to create a public static and we're going to return a string and it's going to be called feedback. Call it feedback. And we are going to need a parameter. So we're going to need an integer called score. Okay, remember that this score is only visible, or its scope is only inside the method. So it's important that you guys understand that this score has absolutely nothing to do with the score that we declared in other part of the program. Okay, this score only has its scope inside this method. This is important. Sometimes some people like to call it something else, like score 1 or score or m score, just to kind of like differentiate that this is another variable different from the one that they're using outside the method. But it's important that you guys kind of like understand that this is just going to be inside here. So we have score, and we're going to use that score to kind of like verify our program. So here we're just going to copy and paste our conditional methods, and we will do some modifications to this. So we have the same variable because it's score. So it says if score is greater than 10, then here is a quick change. Instead of printing, since we are in a method, we are going to return. We're going to return this string. Excellent, very nice. Now with the else if, happens exactly the same. If score is greater or equal than 5 and less than or equal than 10, then instead of system.out.println, we're going to say return, and we have the good job. Okay, and just in case something else happens, then we're going to return we'll need to improve. So here we have the 3 different options. So we have if score is greater than 10, return this, and return this, just to get a feedback. And then, of course, from our void method, we have to call it. Okay, we're going to call our main. Here we go. In our void main method, we are going to, after we calculate, we are going to call the feedback, and feedback returns a string. So in that case, I'm just going to print ln and just call feedback, right? But feedback requires a score. So in order to get the parameter from score, I never stored it anywhere. So instead of doing this, I'm just going to store score, or I'm just going to create a score. Remember that this score that I'm creating here has nothing to do because the only scope is inside this. In score, and I'm going to call calculate one more time. And now instead of printing calculate, I'm just going to print score. And now I can use score to send it to the feedback. Okay, so basically, I declared score. I declared a variable called score. Now I call calculate and it returns the score. Now it's stored here. Then I print it just so I can see it. And then I am going to call feedback, and that feedback is a string. Okay, so feedback requires an integer value. Just because, remember that in feedback, you require an integer value so it can work. Then here in feedback, you are going to type in score. Remember, again, this score is this score. It has nothing to do with this one until I pass it on to the method. This is important. The scope of the variables in our program. Okay, so I'm sending score and then I'm printing this last score. Okay, so basically, I think we're pretty much with our program. And hopefully, let's see if it works. Let's just kind of like run it and check for any syntax errors. Well, it looks like it is running, so I'm going to do it again. Just run it, Peter Parker. Now I know that this has the number of steps and it works, so I'm going to say I did 3,000 steps, and then I did 120 minutes, and then it says rounded hour 7. Good job. So this is a feedback method working right there in our program. And like this, you can get anything divided into methods. Now, another pro of working with methods is that you can have many people in your group or in your team working for like parallel. You just tell them, what are you returning so I can use it, and what parameters do I need for the method to use. So if you're with a group of people, you say, okay, you can work on the ask info, another person can work on the accept, another person can work on the feedback, and another person on the calculate. And basically you just have to ask them as like the project administrator, just ask them, what do you return? What are you returning? What type of variable? And how does it work? So pretty much is the method signature. Okay, guys, I hope this wasn't too long. Hopefully you guys can wrap it up with the use of methods. We will talk about our next tutorial. We're going to talk about lists. So we're going to kind of like start playing with lists and lists of different types of variables. And that way you can actually loop around the variables, etc., etc. So see you next time.